Um, you guys seem really tense this morning, and so we gotta loosen that up here. And so, because I was sick all week, I forgot about communion. That's why there's no communion today. So I know, Denise, you come for communion, and I apologize, we don't have it today. So we'll have communion next Sunday. Just FYI, I just completely forgot about it. It was just a really rough week again. And so, and then to top it all off, Dana wasn't feeling well yesterday, so I said, you better go to urgent care. And so she went, and she's got influenza B. So she's at home today, and because of the two illnesses I had and the antibiotics I've been on, the doctor said that we can't be near each other because I could get really sick from her. So there's that. So anyways, so she's wearing a mask when she's in the house. So anyways, fun. So why are you guys so serious? I mean, I'm just trying to figure this out. And so this morning we're gonna continue in our look at the book of Acts. We're in week 18 so far of our study, still in chapter 5 of the book of Acts. And today we are going to be looking at verses 12 through 16 of chapter 5. And I'm not going to have time to finish it because there's a lot more information in there than I was able to put together. Just like I said, because I didn't want to be stuck up here and have something terrible happen. And so the Acts is the 5th book of the New Testament. And so if you have your Bible with and would like to open to Acts chapter 5, or if you have an app on your phone, please go ahead and turn there now. But if you don't have a Bible or Bible app, we're going to have the words on the screen behind me for you to follow along. And so here's what it says and I read this last week, so if you were here last week, you did hear it, but this is what it says. It says, "Now many signs and wonders were regularly done among the people by the hands of the apostles. And they were all together in Solomon's portico. None of the rest dared join them, but the people held them in high esteem. And more than ever, believers were added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women, so that they even carried out the sick into the streets and laid them on cots and mats, that as Peter came by, at least his shadow might fall on some of them. The people also gathered from the towns around Jerusalem, bringing the sick and those afflicted with unclean spirits, and they were all healed." And so this is another interesting section here in the book of Acts because there's a lot being communicated once again in these very short verses. And the first thing that jumps off the page to me anyways is verse 12. And verse 12 tells us that many signs and wonders were regularly done among the people. All right, the word many means large number. Regularly means at a consistent or frequent basis. So what they're saying there is a large number of people were frequently being healed. And I'm trying to wrap my brain around this because it is incredibly hard for me to picture something like this, seeing something like this happen, because it's just not something that we experience today. We don't have lines forming outside the church and people walking up and us laying hands on them and being healed. And as much as we'd love to see that, we just don't see it. And so it's something that's very difficult to picture. And then another thing that the text says is it says that it happens at the hands of the apostles. And I think for a lot of us, when we read that, we go, well, that's why it's not happening here, because it's happening at the hands of the apostles. And of course, the apostles, that's John, that's Peter, that's James, that's Matthew, that's these other dudes who were close to Jesus, the ones that we call the apostles, that have that title attached to their name. And so what I started to do was I started to read a bunch of Greek people or Greek scholars and their comments on this section to figure out if this is indeed what they were talking about, if it was the few going out doing ministry to the many. And what I found was that most of the people, and I'm not going to bore you with the details because it's technical Greek in comparison with other texts and stuff like that to try and get the exact meaning of what's going on here, but they seem to agree that this is not what Luke was referring to. He is not saying that it's by the hands of the apostles only, the guys with the title, but Luke is referring to the whole church. Those that follow Jesus are the apostles that are talked about in this text. You may be saying, well, how can that be? Well, see, in the church in Jerusalem, the term apostle was not a title at first. They didn't refer to them as apostles in that time. It was actually what defined a believer, because the word literally means sent ones. And so the word was used liberally for those that took up the call of Jesus to live on the mission that he had given to reach the lost. Those who grabbed a hold of the Great Commission and went and made disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all Jesus commanded. See, the church, the people of the church, the writers of the New Testament believed, viewed the early church as the apostles. They didn't see it as an official church position. They didn't label someone an apostle like we do today, because I know this happens today. I mean, there's an Assembly of God pastor here in Florida that changed his name or changed his title recently. He changed it from pastor to apostle, and that's what he expects the church to call him, and that's what he goes by. And that's what he calls himself, is apostle. And another guy that I saw calls himself apostle to the nations. So he's even more important than the apostle. He's the apostle to the nations, right? And in the New Testament, years after the establishment of the first church here, it was given an official church position in Ephesians 4:11. But the picture that Paul had in mind when he describes an apostle was more along the lines of somebody who served as a missionary. And he was basing this title on the calling that he had received from God. You see, Paul was called out, and we're going to come to this text a little later in the series in Acts chapter 13, but he had a special calling. Paul and Barnabas were set aside for a specific work, and they were sent to go into the nations, sent to go to other places, to other countries. And the thing is what we got to wrap our brains around is, what did Paul go through? How did Paul live to make this his calling and to make it something special and different that differs from what somebody in the church today may be calling themselves an apostle? And Paul gives a brief summary of his life as an apostle in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, where he explains what his life looked like as an apostle in verses 22 through 28. And here's what he said there, and it was a lot more in this text, and I just didn't want to spend a ton of time reading the text here, but here's what he says. He says, "Are they Hebrew? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they offspring of Abraham? So am I. Are they the servants of Christ? I am a better one. I am talking like a madman, with far greater labors, far more imprisonments, with countless beatings, and often near death. 5 times I received at the hands of the Jews 40 lashes less 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I was adrift at sea, on frequent journeys, in danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from my own people, danger from Gentiles, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship, though through many a sleepless night, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure, and apart from other things, there is the daily pressure on me of my anxiety for all the churches." See, this is what Paul had in mind when he described somebody who was living their life as a true apostle for Jesus Christ. Paul wasn't talking about somebody who was just living on mission of connecting people to Christ, living on mission of telling people and sharing their faith, because that's the mission of every single believer. Paul was thinking beyond that, somebody who had received a special calling, people who had been called to take the gospel to places where it could cost them their life, where it could cost them their very being, those who broke new ground, those who went out of their way to take the message of Jesus beyond where they were currently at. And those who have the title now, they've never lived like that. They not live this life that Paul describes. Many of them live very comfortable lives. The reason they classify themselves as apostles is usually because they have several churches under their care, like Paul, and so they're thinking about the anxiety of managing all of these churches, but they don't consider everything else that Paul went through in order to have those churches under his care and authority. And that's why I would be careful applying this title to myself or anyone else for that matter. But this labeling and putting titles on ourselves exposes a different problem that we have in the church, and that's the professionalization of ministry. See, we believe that there are those Christians who are called to work for Jesus, and then there are those believers who are not called to work for Jesus. But the Bible is pretty clear. See, that all of us are apostles in this one sense of we are sent out by Jesus to minister to the world around us. It doesn't matter the title that we hold, the degrees that we receive, the callings that we have that are specialized from God. That stuff is irrelevant. You see, our calling, the instructions that Jesus gave before he left this earth are the only thing that is relevant to our situation. See, it's not just me that's called to reach the lost. It's not just my burden because I am the professional here. Because there's no such thing as a professional Christian. Okay? And it's funny because this has bothered me so much that Dana and I have had the conversation that maybe we need to step out of ministry and be a church person so that people can see what it means to live for Jesus. Because it's like so much of the church has lost this, and we've gone to a place where we believe that the ministry and the professionals take care of that stuff, and we just come to be entertained on a Sunday morning. It doesn't work that way. To live how Jesus has called us to live, it's to be an example of what Jesus is calling his followers to. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to live the life, be that example, and follow his calling. And the next thing this text tells us is what happens when we do truly live as sent ones. It says, no one else dared join them, but they held them in high esteem. So commentators believe that the reason that no one dared join them had to do with what happened with Ananias and Sapphira. You know, just a brief recap, if you remember from a few weeks ago, but Ananias and Sapphira, they were the people who went and sold a piece of property, and they went to the apostles, and they said they were giving all of the money to the church, but they held back some, kept it in their pockets, and when they were confronted about their lies, they continued to maintain their lies, and so God struck both of them dead. All right, it's just one of the weirdest stories in the New Testament or in the Bible itself. And so what's believed here is that these people, is that there were people that were willing to join the church, the early gathering of believers, because of how they lived, okay? And we talked about this a few weeks ago, but we looked at it where they said they had everything in common. They were together, they were breaking bread, they were getting together in households, so basically people in the early church, they were taking care of each other, right? They had shelter, they had food, they had the essentials, they had clothing, they had all of this stuff. And when we get to Acts chapter 6, we're going to see that the church did daily feedings where they literally fed hundreds of people, possibly thousands of people, every single day, provided meals so that people's needs were taken care of so that they weren't hungry. And so there was people who looked on this and said, well, I don't really want to follow Jesus, but I want all of my needs taken care of. And so what's believed here is that those people who were just affiliated with the church but not true believers, when they saw what happened to Ananias and Sapphira and where it got you when you lied to God, is a lot of them decided they were going to step back because they didn't want to be eating dinner one day and just drop dead in the middle of dinner. See, Ananias and Sapphira demonstrated you can't lie to God and pretend you're spiritual for the benefits that you get from it. So those that were attempted to lie to God decided they didn't want to die, so they kept their distance because the affiliation was not worth their life. But they still held the church in high esteem. Why? Because they lived out their convictions. They faced arrest and persecution by the Jewish leaders as well as the Romans, but still they continued to live their life. They preached the message. They prayed for the sick. They cast out demons. They didn't compromise their beliefs, and it earned their respect. I mean, many scholars believe that this respect even went to the Pharisees and religious leaders, those who were trying to kill them. It's believed that they had great respect for the early church just because they lived out the gospel. So even their enemies respected them. And so we're in a situation today where it just doesn't seem to be as true as it once was, where people had the respect for the church. So we're going to have a little bit of a real honest conversation. And we don't really live by our convictions. See, the American church, what we try to do is we try to live as close to the culture as we can without ending up going to hell, right? Some of you are like, no, that's not true at all. You're the one living close to the edge. No, I'm just kidding. Most believers say that they live by their convictions, but when you look at our lives, they just don't match up with the words that we say and the things that we believe. I mean, there's many believers nowadays who, when it comes to spiritual things and faith things, the person who makes the decision in their home is their children. Whatever their child wants to do or children want to do on a Sunday morning, that's what the family does. You want to go to church? Sure, we'll go to church today. They're in church that Sunday. You want to go to church? No, I want to go to the beach. Okay, we'll go to the beach today. Oh, you want to go to church? No, let's go to Disney. Okay, we'll go to Disney today. And this is, there's literally one person who came to me and said, and this was recently, this was in the last 6 months. They said, on Sunday mornings, I ask, do you want to go to church today? And if the answer is no, we do not go. Because I want her to be happy. See, we are not called to make our children happy. Our call is to live a life, the life that Jesus has called us to live, so that they will follow Jesus and they will get into heaven one day. We just put too much focus on the here and now. And it's what's killing us. It's what's killing the church. The average believer goes to church 1.2 times per month. In the last 30 years, you got to picture this. This is a steep decline, okay? In the last 30 years, church attendance has gone from 3 times a week to 1.2 times a month. That's why, and I'm not saying church attendance is the solution to everything, but it's a key into people's spiritual lives. And really, if you were to say, okay, why don't you spend 1.2 days, which is really 1.2 hours, because really, how long is a church service? I mean, we're usually done in an hour and 20 minutes. A lot of churches are shorter than that. Would you spend 1.2 hours with your wife, with your husband, with your child, with your mother, with your father a month and call it good? No. But people say, oh, I'm committed to my family. You know what? It doesn't take Jesus to be committed to your family. There are millions of people in this world who have nothing to do with Jesus, who are committed to their families and making sure their families are taken care of and will do anything for them. That doesn't distinguish us from the rest of the world. Another thing is we're more uncompromising in our political beliefs than we are with our faith. We're far more committed to our leisure time and having fun than we are to our faith. We're more committed to our jobs and our finances than we are to our faith. We are more committed to our status than we are our faith. And this is why the church has lost the respect of the people. See, if we were doing the things that this early church did, we would have the respect. If we were taking care of people, if we were just asking the sick to come so we could pray, if we were seeking out those possessed and praying for their deliverance, if we were caring for the sick, the needy, those who needed water, food, and a shoulder to cry on, we would have the respect. I mean, here's one of the things that we do. This is probably going to tick some people off. We can't just be anti-abortion. We got to be pro-life. What does that mean? It means we need to not just make sure the child makes it out of the womb, but then once they're out, we have to do everything we can in our power to make sure that they live a productive life. See, I've told the story of the early church in here before, and one of the things that made them so powerful was in Roman society, you could dispose of children at your will. You had a child, and it was like there was a defect, or it was a girl and you wanted a boy. You could literally take that baby, set it outside the city, and allow it to either die from exposure. The theory was this: well, if I put the baby out there and it survives, then God wanted it to survive. All right, that is the most stupid thing I've ever heard in my life, but this is what they did. And they would put the baby out there. The baby would either die of exposure or get eaten by animals, right? And so what Christians started to do was they started to go out there and rescue all of these Roman children that were disposed of. That's pro-life. It's not just saying, let's not let the babies die. It's making sure that we're taking care of them when they're out and they're in this world. That's why they held the church in high esteem, because they lived by their convictions. They faced arrest and persecution by the Jewish leaders, by the Romans, and still they lived it out. They preached the message. They prayed for the sick. They cast out demons. They didn't compromise their beliefs, and it earned their respect. Many scholars even believe that the Pharisees and religious leaders were a part of this group of respect, so even their, I messed up there. All right, somehow that spun back to a previous paragraph. But what we want to do in the church today is instead we hope that celebrities become Christians. So we can tell others they came to Jesus, hoping that will give us credibility. I mean, Justin Bieber, when he became a Christian a few years ago, he was the Jesus poster boy. And people were like, see, Jesus is better because the Biebs is a Christian. Recently, Kat Von D from the TV show Miami Inc. and LA Inc. became a Christian. Some of you may have heard about this. And people were excited about it until they found out that she was going to a small, old-school Baptist church in Indiana and at a cool megachurch with a cool pastor. They thought it was weird because she's cool. I mean, she's got tattoos literally everywhere on her body. I mean, I haven't seen her without any clothes on, all right? I just what I've seen from pictures with her wearing clothes, she's got tattoos everywhere that you could see, all right? But she's cool, right? And she should be with cool Christians and cool Christianity. Not some old school Baptist church where they literally still have a choir and wear robes. And people were upset and people were offended. It wasn't cool. Can I tell you, churches and pastors should never be cool That's not what gives us credibility. And until the church realizes in America that our credibility doesn't come from the coolness of the pastors, from the coolness of the church, from the coolness of the people that attend that church. I mean, how many of you watched the documentary on, there was a couple different ones, but on Hillsong, New York, and what happened there? Did anybody watch that with, God, what was the pastor's name? I'm just drawing a blank right now. But I can see his face. But anyways, huh? No, not Furtick. What was his name? Anyways, I watched a couple of shows, documentaries on this. They were the coolest church in the country. The celebrities went there. I mean, that's where Justin Bieber went to church. That's where a lot of the NBA players in the New York area went to church. He had football players going to his church. He had pictures of himself hanging out, walking down the beach with Justin Bieber in New York. And everybody was like, oh, I want to go to that church because it is so cool. The church doesn't even exist anymore because cool Christianity collapsed. Because the pastor, and he was a cool-looking dude. I mean, he had the $300 sunglasses and the $800 sneakers and the clothes that were probably hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and he worked out all the time, and he was ripped, and he'd wear a shirt like unbuttoned down to here, even when he was preaching. I was like, anyway, but it collapsed because it was all about cool, and it was never about Christ and the mission that Jesus had given. And that's what our church has to be about. Our church has to be about living that mission, living it passionately, living it powerfully. Because that is what is going to give us respect in the community. Now, I will say we do have respect in the community. I got a call last week. Danny Higgins had called me. She's from RCMA. Anyway, she had called me, and she says, hey, I just want you to know that I was at a meeting at the United Way of Central Florida, and United Way was talking about Fam Church when I was there. They were talking about all the great things that you do, how you're making a difference in the community and that sort of stuff. She goes, I just want you to know United Way knows that you're there and knows what you're doing. And so that's great that we have that reputation, but we need to leverage that to reach our community for Christ. We can't just walk out these doors saying that was a good message and boy, Acts is exciting, but we got to walk out these doors saying, you know what? We've got this same mission that they had. We have the same power that they have. Why? Because I am an apostle. I am sent by God, and I can do all of these things that the early church was doing. I can pray for the sick and they will recover. I can cast out demons. I can talk to people about Christ and see them come to faith. I can pray and people will receive the Holy Spirit. I can do all of these things because I am sent by Jesus. And that's who we are. And we need to remember that because that should give us confidence. That should give us strength. That should allow us to stand straight up and walk out those doors and be able to say, I am a believer in Jesus, and He has power, and I have power. And so we're going to close. And what I'd like to do in closing this morning is I would just keep the music playing. And let's have the prayer team come forward. And if anyone needs prayer this morning, we want to pray for you. Whether it's in regards to this message, whether it's you need healing, you need God to touch an area of your life. You've got something that's oppressing you and you need it lifted off. You want to be filled with the Holy Spirit, or you need Jesus today. Maybe you're sitting here this morning and you're saying to yourself, I don't know this Jesus and I want to receive Him. They are up here to pray for you. because Jesus is still here. Jesus still has that power, and we are sent, and we are called, and we can use that power. And so the front of the room is open. If you need prayer for anything, please come forward and allow one of us to pray.